Well, Happy New Year to everybody. The start of 2024. And I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that follow the tradition of writing out a list of resolutions. I resolve not to do this anymore. I resolve to start doing this, all in an effort to get you to a better place or to be a better person. But I'm sure there's one type of resolution very, very few people actually put down, and that is a change of attitude. We list things we don't want to do and things we do want to do, but a change of attitude would eliminate the need for those lists, because you would then stop doing the things you don't want to do and start doing the things you do want to do. And that's what the theme of the three poems we're going to look at today are, and they have to be read all three together. Now, the first one does not have a happy ending and nothing is resolved. The second one is about a point in time, and the last one is about, well, what do we do then? What is this change of attitude? How do we look at life? And you have to, I think, put all three together, because you can't just read this first one and walk away. Now, this first one is dark and pensive and moody, with no resolution, only resignation. So we want to get out of this one. So let's just jump right in here. This is Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. We have seen Robert Frost before. The poem that I had done before was The Road Not Taken, where the narrator faced a choice, this path or another path. And metaphorically, it is sort of a fundamental decision all humans get to in life, where they have to make a choice about which way to go. Do I move to this city and take that job, or do I stay here with my network of friends and family? Big life-changing decisions. Here we have a narrator that has to make a decision, but the decision isn't among different options. The decision is resignation, is just an unhappy decision. So there aren't two paths, there's only one. And the decision is to stay on the path. Then we'll see at the very end the resignation. And it's just a beautiful poem. I'm normally not one that gets really heavy into the structure, the meter and the rhyme and the verse. I normally don't get into the art of that. It's more about the metaphorical and reading of the poem, and does it have meaning for me, and do I find that parts of my life are reflected in there. But this one, you cannot divorce the structure from the message, because it is ironic that the narrator has this fundamental moment that all humans will have, this fundamental moment that relates specifically to the weight of the obligation of the structure on his life. I say his. We don't know if it's a he or a her, and I think that's what makes this poem timeless, because it will survive the test of time, because it is gender neutral in this sense. We assume that it's a man because it was written about 100 years ago, and it's a person traveling on horse. We assume out on some business somewhere, or coming back from some business, and that was typically male dominated. But at no point does it say that this is a message for men. It is a fundamental condition of humans that they will, especially in society, come to these points in their life. The structure has to be talked about. We have 4 by 4 by 4. We have 4 stanzas, each with 4 lines, each with 4 iams. An iam is ... So if you look at the first line, whose woods these are, I think, I know. Those are iams, and there's 4 iams, which makes this iambic tetrameter. And I don't think the tetrameter is as important as the iambic. That is the big choice, because we can look at the meter as meaning 2 things in the background. As we're reading it, I want you to think about what is happening in the background. We can think of it as hoofbeats, a horse trotting down a path, continually plodding onwards, clip-clop, 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 the slow march forward. Or we can think of it as a heartbeat, do-do, do-do, do-do. Life meaning symbolizing life itself, the heartbeat of life, or that you're all alone, just you and your heartbeat, and that's it. So we can read it in two ways. And look at the rhyme scheme. I find this a rather interesting one. A, B, C, B, each one foreshadows the next. No, though, snow with a here, which foreshadows queer, near, year. The lake foreshadows shake, mistake, flake, and the sweep foreshadows deep, keep, sleep, and sleep. I'm going to erase that stuff I just draw because I'm going to need to read this, and we don't want to cover it all up. Before I start this poem, let me introduce a story, well, not so much a story, but a bio, let's call it a bio of two individuals. Individual number one is a spiritual person who is faithful with their religion, a person of faith, but has been feeling that because of events that are going on in their life, that perhaps their God has abandoned them. That their God no longer listens to them, sort of like Job. When the trouble started for Job, at some point it's, where is my God? And perhaps that this is what we have with this person here, has suffered a series of misfortunes, has prayed, none of the prayers were answered, and bad things just keep happening, or no good things are happening in this person's life. And they get to the point where they're even questioning their faith. The other is a person who, through life, has collected obligations, family, children, work, and these obligations have become too much, that there is nothing left of the person, and the entire day is spent living up to the expectations of others, living up to the obligations of others. I'm sure we've all had those days where, your partner wants this, your kids want that, your boss at work wants this, and at some point it becomes a little too much. The next person that knocks on your door saying, hey, okay, everybody, can you all just take a step back, please? Can you give me a minute? Jeez, help yourselves. Have you ever had those moments where it would just piles up into just too much? Or that you're living a life that you feel is not your life. It's not an authentic life. And you're living up to the expectations of others, and no one's really listening to you. I don't really want to do this, and I don't want to go to that school, and I don't want to be an engineer or a doctor. But everyone's just saying, or people around you saying, oh, well, you just need a break. You just need a vacation. Just take a vacation, come back, clear your mind. They're not hearing you. They just think that you're going through something, but they're not really hearing you anymore. They don't see you. They see what they want to see in you, which is the obligation or the expectation of what you'll be. Have you ever gotten to one of those moments where you thought, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living this life. This is not me. Or you're in a relationship and the obligation of that relationship is weighing on you, and you think, I can't go on like this anymore. If I go another day, I will be lost forever. I can't continue on. And you have these moments of reflection where you think, what can I do? You're married, you have children, you have a job, and you think, if I leave, there's the kids. Who takes care of the kids? I can't leave, but you can't stay. This is what this poem is exploring, that fundamental moment that everybody gets to. And I warn you now, it is not a happy ending. It is an ending of resignation, of saying, what choice have I got? And I think that's the saddest thing of all, is to be living an inauthentic life and resign yourself to it because you feel you have no other choice but to continue on. Those are the two ways that you can read this poem. An individual having a crisis of faith, or an individual having a crisis of identity. Let's read it first without any interpretation, and then we'll read it with the two interpretations. Whose woods these are, I think I know. And we have to pay attention. I keep doing that kind of thing. I start and then I stop. We have to pay attention to the choice of the words that are being used, because there aren't that many. This is the beauty of Robert Frost. I compare this to Beethoven's Fifth. I think it stands at that level of art. Beethoven's Fifth, if you listen to it, uses 4 notes. Da, 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 da. Uses 4 notes. And you'll hear those 4 notes repeating throughout, again and again and again. What he accomplished with 4 notes is majestic. What Robert Frost accomplishes here with 4 stanzas, 4 lines, and 4 iambs is majestic. You don't have a lot of room to use words that are meaningless. Every word matters. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Look at the think. Introduces uncertainty right away. The whole theme of this is the uncertainty of it is, what do I do? Where is my God? Do I continue on? Right? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. What does the village represent? The structure of society. He will not see me stopping here. I'm all alone. Nobody sees me. Nobody knows I'm here. I'm all by myself. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. There's that obligation, right? What are we doing here? Shouldn't we be somewhere? This is not very functional, is it, to stop here? What's the purpose of this? My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. That's a pivotal moment. We'll come back to that darkest. But between the woods and frozen lake, how many people, of those 2 people that I described, a good sort of description of where they are in life is between a rock and a hard place, right? The rock is the life that you have. It's immovable. That's the structure of it. The hard place is leaving your life. The uncertainty of what would be next. You're between a rock and a hard place, right? The darkest evening of the year. We have the idea that, well, if it's the woods are filling up with snow, you have a frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year, it must be somewhere around December 20th, right? But that would be wrong. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. There's that reminder of the obligation again. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Listen to how lyrical that sounds. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. It's an escape of that obligation. The S sound sounds the sweep. The S sound. Think of the Garden of Eden and the snake and temptation. The snake tempted Eve. The only other sounds the sweep. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. You hear the resignation. This poem wouldn't be as beautiful if there were 2 different lines. It had to be the same line. There had to be that resignation. How many times have you come to that point where you think, I can't keep doing this, but I got no choice? And you almost say it to yourself twice, I can't keep going on, but what am I going to do? What am I going to do? That resignation of it. Okay, let's read it in terms of a person questioning their faith. Because they're questioning their faith, they know that the earth is God's creation. But in the first line, they don't even know anymore. Whose woods these are? I think I know. I think it's God. I think I know. His house, his church, his temple, his mosque, his house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here. He doesn't see me anymore. He doesn't hear me. He doesn't see me. He won't see me here. The resignation of it. Learned helplessness. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. And because there's this resignation of, well, God only exists in his church. He's not out here anymore. He doesn't see me anymore. The capitalization, his house, and then the small letters here, I think, instead of I know this is God's creation. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Let's talk about the darkest evening of the year. Anybody who has been in a northern climate where there is snow and they can drive out of their city into the woods knows that it is bright. It's not dark. Even if there's no moonlight, even if there are no stars, even if the sky is cloudy at night, the snow brightens up the forest. You can see a long ways in a snowy forest. Now, go in July when there is no snow and see how far you can see. It's pitch black. You can't see anything. But if there's a fox or a wolf or a moose, I say moose because you're going up north, 100 yards out, you'll see it in the winter because you'll see it brighten up against the snow. It's hard to hide in the forest with snow cover, but it's super easy to hide in the forest in July. So the idea that it be the darkest evening of the year. Now, if you want to preserve the I am, you could have said the longest evening of the year. You could have said it was the longest evening. Remember now, we have only 16 lines to explore this deep moment of the human condition. Every word matters. Darkest wasn't a mistake. It doesn't refer to the night. It refers to the mood that this person is in. That point in your life where you're the most lost, the darkest evening of the year. Besides, how do you know it if we are referring to the visual aspect of it? How do you know it's the darkest evening of the year unless it's the last day of the year and you can then clearly say this has been the darkest evening of the year? But I grew up in Timmins, in Ontario, in Canada. Look it up on a map. You got to go way up north. We don't have forest. We call it the bush. And you do a lot in the bush in the winter if you're snowmobiling. You have visibility down that pathway. Even at night with no moon shining, you have visibility. But if you're on your bike on that same path on a July night, you don't see a damn thing in front of you without a light. The darkest evenings of the year are in the summer. So this must be mood, the darkest evening of the year. There's that obligation again. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. And the temptation, the only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. But we are again between the woods and frozen lake. Does that sound tempting? Frozen lake is letting us know that this is not a place to hang out. Really, it looks good because it's an alternative to what we have. It's an escape to what we have, but it's not really that great, right? The woods are lovely, dark and deep. I have promises to keep. We'll look at Hamlet in a second here to see what these promises happen to be. I have promises to keep because it's still a man of faith, questioning their faith, but still, I shouldn't say a man, a person of faith. And within a faith, there are rules that your God sets out. One of them is a rule against killing yourself, right? Against suicide. I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. The death is more like a sleep, or is referred to as a sleep. And we'll see in Hamlet, he refers to the same thing, to die, to sleep, to dream perchance, to die, to sleep. Hamlet is at the same moment early in the play when he starts the lines, "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon 'gainst self-slaughter." Canon spelled C-A-N-O-N. Canon meaning a body of laws or a law. That God had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. I have promises to keep. Let's just look at that soliloquy from Hamlet first to see how that one resolves, because it ends in resignation as well. Okay, so here is the first soliloquy. It starts off, and it's reflecting that same moment our narrator from the poem is in, where you think, I just can't go on like this. "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." In other words, why can't I just disappear? "Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon 'gainst self-slaughter." I can't kill myself. I'm a person of God. I made a promise to God. I got this promise to keep. I can't just do that, and my body's not just gonna melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Oh God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem all the uses of this world. Have you ever gotten to that point where you think, well, what am I doing? None of this is worth it. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. There is where our narrator is. We don't have to read the middle part. The middle part is him lamenting his father's death and how quickly his mother remarried to a man lesser than his father. And that's what gets him, lesser than his father. Let's just go right to the last lines. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. There's nothing I can do. Break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. Just this resignation at the very end. Okay, here is probably the more famous soliloquy by Hamlet, where here he dives into that question a little bit more about choice. To be or not to be, that is the question. And the next line is, we could read it as the obligation of life, the life that you are not, that you feel isn't authentic, but you have to live. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. We don't have to continue on, but it is talking about life and what all the difficulty of life and the escape that death would be, but to what? This unknown what? Because when he says to sleep, perchance to dream, he stops, he says, there's the rub. When we have there's a rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come? What's that going to be about? Maybe they're not going to be great. What dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause, right? We think we have it tough right now, but if we choose something else, this unknown something else, as he says, what dreams may come must give us pause. Let's go back to our poem. Okay, let's read it now without resorting to faith or spiritualness, and let's just read it as a fundamental condition that all humans do reach. If you live a life and you assume responsibility, at some point that responsibility begins to weigh heavy on you, and maybe you just need a few minutes to yourself and you'll be okay. Maybe you need a vacation, maybe you need some time away, or maybe you're at that point where you just can't continue on. I've had 2 moments like that in my life where you get to the point of, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. If I continue on, I will die inside. I'll cease to exist and I'll just be going through the paces, but I just can't do this anymore. And you are between a rock and a hard place, because the leaving is also just as terrifying as, well, what do I do if I don't do this? Think about your job that you don't like. You can't take it anymore. You hate the job, but there is an economic reality to life and you need a paycheck. You're between a rock and a hard place. What do? Our second poem will get to the point where you do make the decision to do something. But let's just read it now as this individual who says, I can't keep doing this. Whose woods these are, I think I know, introduces the same uncertainty, which is the theme of the poem. His house is in the village, though. The village is meant to represent the structure of life. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. It's setting up the solitude, that this is a very personal, very private moment in everybody's life. You really don't talk about your frustration with the people that you're frustrated with, because you're going to get a lot of, well, you just need a vacation, you need a break. They won't see you. They won't see you, right? To watch his woods fill up with snow. And his still ownership, even though you're out in the wilderness, the structure still reaches to there. There's still ownership. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. There's the horse reminding you of obligation. Let's jump to the next stanza. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. There's obligation. Clearly, the horse is not thinking anything. And clearly, giving his bells a shake, he's not intentionally doing anything. The horse is not really doing anything. But have you ever been in a certain environment where, let's say, there's an expectation of what life is going to be day after day after day? You end up interpreting everything within that framework. Here's the person interpreting what is clearly not going on as part of his life. Think about psychologists when they do word association. They give you a word and they say, give me the first word that pops into your head. The word itself is not important. It's not as if they could say, oh, well, this means this and it means that. What is important in the series of words that you give is they can see the environment in which your mind is immersed in. What is it that is top of mind for you? And being that the narrator is interpreting the horse as being, let's go, come on, what are we doing here? And the I ams, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, right? My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake. There's that dilemma between, here I am, between a rock and a hard place, the darkest evening of the year, still that same pivotal moment. Gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. When you're in a bad situation, or you're in a situation that's just not fulfilling, almost anything else seems preferable, right? Look, we've already had a description of where we are. Frozen lake, dark evening, the woods, and look how beautiful it sounds. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake, because it's not asking anything of him. It's just existing. There is no obligation in a state of wilderness on the individual. It's this place where you stop and say, just give me a moment here. Now, any place would have been nice. You know, the expression, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. What they don't tell you is the brown spots are just in different places. Think about deciding to abandon it all and stay here. Well, surviving in the wilderness is not going to be easy. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. Again, anything is preferable to what I got to go back to. But I have promises to keep, obligations. There's the weight of obligation and the resignation in the end, and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Not a happy ending, is it? It is a point we all get to in our lives. We all get to. And if you haven't gotten to one yet, it's just because you haven't taken on enough of life's responsibilities. And you will. And everyone has these moments. It used to be called a midlife crisis, where as you go through your 20s, you're still hopeful about the future. You get into your 30s, but there comes a point where you're sort of crossing from your youth into your adulthood, where you have this crisis of identity called the midlife crisis, where you stop, you look around, and you say, what am I doing? These weren't my plans. This is not the place I thought I would be. You've given up some dreams. Some dreams are put on a shelf. You think you'll get to them later on, but maybe you're not happy in your job. Maybe you're not happy in your marriage or your relationship. And you have these moments where it's just, what am I going to do? I mean, what can I do? That resignation at the end. Not a very good poem to start a year with, right? It's like, well, great, you've described a problem. Now what? Well, let's find out what now. This poem is called Risk. It's not really a poem as much as it is a beautiful sentence if you just write it out as one long sentence, and a very poignant and deep sentence. And it was written by somebody named Anais Nin. I'll try to, if I get it right, Anais, and I think it had this, Anais Nin. You may have heard it, the name pronounced Anais Nin, but in a speech she gave in, I don't know when, it was in front of a university, and I think it was in the 70s. It's on YouTube, where she starts by saying, you may wonder how I pronounce my name, and clap if you do, and the whole audience applauded, and she pronounce it 3 times. Anais. Anais. Her name is Anais Nin. Risk. And now she wasn't really a poet. She was what's called a diarist. She kept a diary of her life as she went through her life, and it was more salacious than anything else. She was bisexual and documented all of that in her diary. So let's read what we have here. Risk. And then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom, and uses the analogy of a flower, because what we see with a flower is we see a bud on a flower in the spring for a fairly long period of time, and then one day it just blossoms all in one day. It just does it all in one day. It doesn't slowly blossom over a couple of days. It's almost as if there was a point in time where the flower said, nope, no, it's too dangerous to stay here. We have to blossom. The risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And think about that moment in your life that you get to where you say, I cannot do this anymore, but you resign yourself to it. You'll have another moment, and then another moment, because that won't go away. And you'll get to this point where you say, nope, this is it. If I stay one more minute, I will die inside. The risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. So we think of Hamlet's soliloquy of, to die, to sleep, to dream, perchance. But what dreams may come? Well, we got to think about that. Maybe that's not going to be so great. But you get to this moment where you're not thinking about, well, hang on now. If I change my life, that's going to be really, really risky to do. And this is that moment where the risk of not changing is greater than the risk of changing. That's all we have to do on this one. I think that's sort of a nice little way to talk about that one moment where your whole attitude shifts, where you say, nope, I must step forward into the unknown. I can't stay where I am. Well, let's look at some good advice, and that we'll get from Wordsworth. Okay, this is Wordsworth's A Psalm, Psalm, a Psalm of Life, or a Song of Life. If we look at Robert Frost, there are 2 ways to read a poem. Let's start with that. 2 ways to read. You can read literally, which is not a very satisfying way to read a poem. And you can read metaphorically. And when you read metaphorically, that's where you connect with the poem and you find meaning in your own life. Sometimes a poem has a way, especially artists that use words as their art form have a way of saying things that are in your head that you don't know how to express, but a poem does it for you. And you say, that's it right there. That's how you would say it. And that's why poetry is so beautiful, because you can find yourself in there. And in finding yourself in there, you then have the words for who you are and how you're feeling and what you want, that you may not have on your own. We're not all gifted in the same ways, right? I'm great with numbers. I'm not that great with words. I could never write poetry anywhere near as perfectly as Robert Frost. Anywhere near. He is the Wayne Gretzky of poetry, if we want to use a hockey analogy. With Wordsworth, let me back up a bit. With Frost, you really have to read metaphorically. With Wordsworth, especially with this poem, we don't have to read as metaphorically. It says what it says. We don't have to think about it too much. So we can read it literally. What makes this poem really great is the beauty of the language and the things that he's saying. There are some beautiful stanzas in here that you're probably going to want to write down. It's the kind of thing that you put on inside a frame of something and you hang it on your wall. Those sorts of stanzas, right? So let's begin. And there are some things we'll contrast here. The rhyme scheme is fairly simple: A B, C D, E F, etc. The iambs are not clean. But I don't think they need to be, because the structure isn't important. Structure was hugely important for Frost. And when you go over to someone like Walt Whitman, structure was, what structure? What's that, right? So let's begin. Tell me not, in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. I find that last line to be a rather clumsy line, but okay. Tell me not that life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Here, we are invoking duality. If we think about Descartes' duality, if we think about the philosophy of the mind, there's the physical body and then there's the soul. There's a duality to humans. You don't necessarily have to believe that to find value in this poem, but that's the sort of perspective being written here. The soul, we're talking about the soul. The soul is dead that slumbers, and the dust thou art, to dust returnest. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You know that the priest at the funeral usually say those things at the grave. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way. And this is contrasting two philosophies, Western philosophy with Eastern philosophy. If we think about the Constitution, the American Constitution, but the pursuit of happiness, we acknowledge that I'm not sure about all the words that men are endowed with certain inalienable rights. One of them being the pursuit of happiness. One of the founders, I think one or two of the founders of the American founders also went over to France in the 1790s after their revolution and helped them craft their constitution. And in there is also the pursuit of happiness. It's seen as a Western ideal. More Eastern ideal, Buddhism. What is the first, what do they call it? The first something of Buddhism, or the first law of life? Life is suffering. You must first come to the conclusion or the embrace the realization that life is suffering. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us further than today. Isn't that beautiful? But act that each tomorrow find us further than today. And if you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that I've said in many different places, the only true benchmark you have is you, is yourself yesterday. That is your only true benchmark in life. Don't compare yourself to other people. You compare yourself to who you were yesterday, last week, last year. And that's your benchmark. And to beat your benchmark, you just have to be better in some aspect than you were yesterday. Or as Wordsworth says, to act that each tomorrow find us further than today. Art is long and time is fleeting. Let's just break that down for a minute. The art is long. There, I think we need to think about art in a broader sense. Art being the output of human action, whether it be an invention, whether it be architecture, a building, whether it be actual painting, music, art, the art of your life. Right? Something that lives longer than you, something that lasts beyond you. Art is long and time is fleeting. And our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Wow. Wow. And our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Do-do, do-do. Right? In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not dumb, driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. We'll stop here. In life, we spend a lot of time either looking back on reflection or looking forward dreaming. Looking back and looking forward. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Well, then do what? Act. Act in the living present. Heart within and God o'erhead. Carpe diem, man, right? Seize the day. Don't spend your time reflecting and dreaming. It doesn't do anything. No matter how great those dreams may be, act. Look at one word that's repeated so many times, to act. Act. Act in the living present. The next two are absolutely beautiful. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, meaning great. And departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Art is long. What you do, what you accomplish will outlive you. They will become footprints on the sand of time. And departing, leave behind us footprints on the sand of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. A forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. This last one, this is your resolution for the year. This is it. It all comes down to this. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor and to wait. Sounds like a clumsy line as well, right? Learn to labor and to wait. What this is saying is, have patience. Just because you're doing something now, don't expect it to work out tomorrow. It takes time, right? Patience, persistence, keep at it. What is your goal here? Each tomorrow find us further than today. So what do? We act in the living present. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate. If you want to do something, do it. Don't dream about it, and don't reflect on the past. Oh, I made a mistake. I should have done this. I should have done that. Then do it. Act in the living present. Seize the day. Carpe diem. There we go. There is your change of attitude. There is your New Year's resolution to leave some footprints on the sand of time, so that at some point in the future, some forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing them, shall take heart again. And you, whose footprints on the sands of time are you looking at to take heart again? Have a good 2024.